All right, we're going to get started with our first panel of the day. And again, the overarching question is, what is it to be educated in the 21st century? And this panel has been asked to deal with the issues of depth versus breadth in education, and that's still a pretty wide focus. So there may be many different directions that they can go in. The notion of these panels is to have voices from many different perspectives talk about the subject and maybe spur your thinking, prompt your thinking for the table discussions. And so each of our panelists will have 3 minutes to present. And from left to right, we have Michael Clark, who is Associate Professor of English in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. He's also the Director of the Humanities Center. We have Michael Flower, who is a molecular and developmental biologist and a recently retired professor from University Studies. Sydney Kim is a senior and marketing major at Portland State University, a member of the Dean's Future Leaders Group, a board member of PSU, AMA, an intern for PSU's business school, and AdParents, a local digital marketing firm, and Judith Romali, Distinguished Professor of Public Service, and of course, former president of PSU. So we'll start with Michael Clark.
Well, this is even better. I thank you for this opportunity to talk about the question of education in the 21st century. I'm the director of the Humanities Center here, as well as a professor of English. I'm also a lawyer, and I've been recently working on the relationship of the law and the humanities, and I have a short two-page introduction I'll read from an article that's coming out in the University of Oregon Law Review that touches, I think in March, that touches on some of these issues, some of the issues that we're going to be talking about today. I also want to thank Dr. Riley. I was at the University of Wisconsin-Madison last June for the Consortium of Humanities Centers International annual event. And William Adams was there, the NEH director. I got a chance to talk to him. It was a wonderful, wonderful time, and it was really exceptional. And it's such a great institution, and it's really beautiful. I probably used up my time. Here we go. For at least a decade, and with increasing frequency, we've been hearing that the humanities are in crisis. As higher education, along with all of human culture, it would seem, moves deeper into the digital age, traditional models of self-reflexive humanistic inquiry are giving way to algorithmic practices that show remarkable accuracy, predicting human behavior, environmental trends, economic outcomes, and even the nature of human desire itself. Cognitive neuroscience has staked significant claims in fields as diverse as consumer behavior and religion. It's hard to argue with many of these successes, but according to a 2015 special issue of College Literature, the humanities in the face of this kind of change are like an image retreating in the rearview mirror of a speeding car. Quoting College Literature, the social, economic, and technological forces, whether exploited by unthinking administrators and legislators, and I think the administrators here are actually thinking. So just to make that clear, they're not unthinking. Or simply running to their own conclusions seem to diminish or even render superfluous humanistic modes of inquiry. One PhD candidate at Vanderbilt asked, what if humanities education no longer has a significant role in American life? One of the problems with all these kinds of questions is nobody knows what the humanities are or is. And basically the question, what does it mean to be human, is the question we're asking when we study the humanities. And education absolutely has to be focused on that question. How does all of our insight, how do all our discoveries give richness to our lives? And I'll close because I know I have maybe 40 seconds more. There we go. The humanities serves as the name for a set of inquiries characterized by their commitment to self-questioning and self-critique. According to this understanding, which claims to find its roots in the Socratic maxim that the unexamined life is not worth living for a human being, The humanities allow self-examination to give lasting shape and structure, to give in meaning and value to the life of the free citizen, that notion of citizenship again, and as such to humanize life itself. That sounds like a good plan to me, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
3 minutes. Good luck. I think we're in actually a very enviable position here at Portland State, both with the honors program, university studies, and the host of the usual disciplines. When I was thinking about what I might say, and I had 7 or 8 versions of what that might look like, a couple things struck me, and as I looked at the invocation of the 21st century, it occurred to me that there's a kind of urgency that often I think is missing. I would recommend that, and I'll say more about that in a second. And also the growing entanglements that our lives, our professional work, our students' aims represent. Actually, when Alan asked the question of Dr. Riley, sort of got to what I think would have been my main point, that what seems at risk in the short term and even more over the unfolding of the 21st century is any reasonable sense of the common good. And that was also taken by Dr. Eiler's response about the need to bring, since I thought, political sensibility and reality to the classroom. So what I'm thinking about, what I think is important and worth discussing with respect to breadth and depth is what breadth consists of. And I think there's the entanglement of breadth. Allow students to see entangled questions from the get-go, from the first day they walk onto campus as a freshman. And that depth also be thought of disciplinarily, not only as one course after another and specialization, but also these orthogonal connections that the disciplines have in the real world to confounding circumstances. Right now I'm particularly interested in the question of gene editing, which builds upon my original training as a developmental molecular biologist, which as I look at the literature, is about dramatic genetic breakthroughs, ability to edit the genome with such specificity that things we might not have tried in the past, we will indeed try. Probably the biggest patent battle of the early 21st century going to take place between University of California, Berkeley, and the Broad Institute on the East Coast. There's no way to talk about questions like this without, I think, engaging the question of entanglement. So I think what's at issue for our students and our approach with respect to the question of breadth and depth is a question of immediacy, a question of urgency, a question of the dimension of our responsibility to the future, and to provide a platform from the very first day students walk onto campus to grapple with entanglement, to loosen them from bold-faced terms and textbooks to exploration, and to provide a platform for that. The shape and nature of that platform, I think, is up for discussion.
Thank you. I have a speech written up, so I'm just going to read from that. When I was a child, I read a lot. Now, this is partially because I didn't have any friends as a kid, but also because books brought me joy and insight into worlds that I could never dream of, even to this day. And now in college, I get to experience the same type of joy. But instead of reading while huddled underneath a blanket with a flashlight, I get to sit amongst my peers and learn from passionate and dedicated professors. But as I progressed in my college career as a business student, I realized that many forget the importance of widening your breadth of study. It's easy to get bombarded by life, by your children, by work, by fatigue, and we often start adopting a one-track mind. We forget that a world exists outside of the business school. We instead focus on fulfilling the requirements, and we start counting the credits until graduation. But the problem with this is that people are like pennies. Some dedicate their entire lives towards polishing only one of their sides to become the shiniest, prettiest penny on the floor. But what they fail to realize is that people will quickly become disappointed once they flip them over. They will see the years of neglect that have built up. As students, it is our duty to prevent this. We have such a variety of classes to pick from to hone our critical thinking, to widen our perspectives, and to understand our own sense of values, yet so many of us take their existence for granted. Michelle Obama once said, "The arts and humanities define who we are as a people. That is their power, to remind us of what we each have to offer and what we all have in common, to help us understand our history and imagine our future." As Portland State students, we each have the ability to enrich our lives, and it would be a waste to squander it. In an ever-globalizing world, it is becoming increasingly important that we all work towards becoming our biggest and best selves. Thank you.
At the time of the transition from an old century to a new one, from an old millennium to a new one, the Association of American Colleges and Universities commissioned a study, which I had the pleasure of chairing, that led to a report in 2002 called Greater Expectations. And that captures the gist, I think, of what all of us are saying, that what it means to be educated has taken on a new intensity of meaning, because the problems to which we must now apply ourselves and the way in which we must work together and how we will use what we know have become more and more pressing, more and more intense. And now, whether it's the United Nations or it's the Millennial Project, we have a list of issues that we cannot solve through the lens of a single discipline or through the lens of a single professional practice. Your point about moving beyond the walls, whether they're literal or figurative, of a particular way of seeing the world, is the key to thinking about this. And it's very current. I simply went to both my own email and the Chronicle of Higher Ed, and I'm going to quote two examples. Nicholas Lehman, in January 8th, produced an article, "What Should Graduates Know?" He's a former dean of a school of journalism, and his point is that we cannot and must not pit career-related skill building against deeper understanding, complex knowledge, and the quest for what it means to be human in all of its splendid variation. We have to recognize that the preparation built in the future must integrate those two things so that we graduate people who can respond to a rapidly changing world. Yesterday, popping into my email, was a new report from AAC&U, which identified a growing consensus among college leaders about how to design a general education. By the way, our university studies program is the poster child for that. The articulation of learning outcomes and the use of problem-based learning in all of its variety to promote both skill development and deeper understanding. So what would a curriculum look like that met all these goals? The curriculum as a whole, not each individual part, would be based on a clearly articulated educational philosophy that defines what we expect of a college graduate and that leads to our thinking about how to prepare people to meet those expectations and how to ensure that our students understand and embrace those expectations and appreciate what the design and interpretation of the curriculum offers. But most importantly, when we get to the issue of diversity and inclusion, how they can contribute not only to strengthening and enriching the community of learners that pursues that education, but how they themselves will develop both a multi-dimensional approach to understanding how the world works and how people interact with each other. And this will all be guided by a framework of presenting our best work to each other, so-called authentic assessment, in ways that make clear that we are offering high value, high quality, and an education that can be put to good use in a world where knowledge will have consequences untold, unexplored, unimagined, and where every single day we will confront questions we do not know how to answer without working with others who see the world in different ways to explore them.
Let's thank all of our panelists. If you're a table host, can you raise your hand? All right. Okay, so we have some table hosts who are going to help the conversation. If you're at a table that doesn't have a table host, maybe a table host can adopt you and also come over. You have flip charts at your table. If the provocation of the panel isn't enough, there are some probing questions at your table. And we'd like you to explore this theme of depth and breadth over the next 30 minutes and write down what you think is important, interesting contributions, ideas that we can gather and keep the conversation going on. The next panel will begin at 11:30. If the panelists could meet me at 11:25, that would be great. So, go for it. Thank you.